All right, all right. Just waiting for my dear sister Echo to join us, my teacher, my mentor, my sister. Perfect, she joined. Echo, can you request to, yes, there we go, perfect. Alrighty, just waiting for a beautiful Echo. I've got the Palo Santo going already.
Yeah. I'm doing it. It's happening.
And it is.
This is my first time to do a live. I'm learning.
Yeah, we're learning new things every day.
Yeah.
So I was just saying that I've been Palo Santo. I've got Mother Mary here. She's been reaching out to both of us, it seems, to channel some compassion in this conversation. I'm feeling we need lots of compassion with the subjects and topics that we'll be discussing today. And I also wrote my tarot cards just because why not? Like, why not add an element of randomness and the sacred and spirit? But Echo, I'd love, welcome. First of all, it's amazing to see you, sister.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. I'm so excited. I've been like buzzing for this conversation now. I feel like it might be the first of a few, who knows? But I'd love for us to both take a moment to locate ourselves, to place ourselves in this world so we can connect not only with ourselves and each other, but so others can have a moment to connect in with us. For example, I'm in Colorado right now, and it's a rainy morning in the mountains of Colorado. I've been moving slowly, and I tuned into a yoga practice with Echo on her YouTube channel, a beautiful integrative yoga practice. And there was a moment when we were in bow pose that you said, lean into the tremble. And I was like, isn't that's Echo. Yeah, lean into the tremble, feeling the tremble. And with you, I have learned so many things, but if I could crystallize it, with you, through your presence and teachings, I've learned to get better at feeling, simply. I've learned to become better at feeling, and I'm feeling right now so much excitement. So, Echo, hi.
Hello, my love. Yeah, I'm tuning in from Prague. It's actually sun setting in Prague. It's really beautiful, and I really love that you quoted that back to me, because a lot of times in practices, I rarely remember what I say. And lean into the tremble feels like my life's motto. And so you echoing that back to me, I feel like right now at this time, collectively and individually, I feel like I am like so leaning into the tremble. So yeah, thank you for reminding me.
Oh, and just pulled the Seven of Swords. And that's interesting because for me, it's a card, the Seven of Swords. The swords in the tarot represent the suit of air, of communication, of the mind. And I feel like the medicine of this card is always just tell the truth. And it can speak to trickster energy. It can speak to the lies that we tell ourselves. And, you know, of course, like there's always an invitation with each archetype. And I'm inviting in just like our deepest truths. And because I feel at this time, authenticity, truthfulness, integrity, ethics, these are such important things when it comes to plant medicine work, when it comes to being in spiritual community and, you know, walking your path. So I'm going to spend a minute or maybe three, who knows, just giving a little background on Echo and who she is and how she's affected my life. For these lives, it's become clear to me that I really want to shine a light on the women in my life, the medicine women in my life, who have come in at crucial moments, and just through their beingness, just through their presence, through the way they show up, provide a blueprint for me to work on myself and to deepen in my own process, in my own healing process, in my own creation, in all of the ways. So Echo. Echo, echo. I'm going to actually read from some notes here. So if that's why I look a little like I'm not looking at the camera, that's why. So Echo has paradoxically brought such lightness to my life through all the invitations to shadow work and the permission that she brings to be in grief, in pain, in anger, and ultimately the depth of our human experience. I have seen her hold space for hundreds of people. As a music medicine DJ, she is holding immense space, and the music medicine that she brings is always intentional and has always brought me into deep processes of feeling and exploring the edges and textures of my own darkness in my body through dance. In addition to that, Echo has a yoga school. She runs trauma-informed yoga teacher trainings, and I was a student. I still need to finish it. I trust the timing of my life. And I wanted to bring her on here because she really was one of the first women to show up in my field, embodying authentic, integrated feminine leadership. So Echo is an example of empowerment, of resilience, of sovereignty, of liberation, while also remaining quite vocal in her own process of becoming and unbecoming. She holds a higher vision of what community is. And via this, she invites those in her life to meet themselves at that level of integrity and accountability. She does not hide from the density and stickiness of human relationships and generously shares notes from the field. Echo is an alchemist in the deepest sense of the word, an embodiment of Persephone, the goddess of the underworld and of the spring. She is not afraid to dance with shadow. In fact, that is a through all of her many offerings. I have received your music medicine. I have received your yoga medicine. I have sat in ceremony with you and purged with you. I have sat on the beach with you and sang with you. We're sisters. And I have always felt safe to reveal the tenderest parts of my being in Echo's presence. I never felt threatened by her mastery or her depth or her wisdom because she shares it, teaches it, and offers it back generously. Maybe I was threatened. And that was actually the first interaction that I had with Echo. It was simply that she was asserting a boundary, and for some reason I was like, what? Like, why is she so mean? And in that moment, I could not I couldn't write you off, because there was something about your magnetism and your freedom of expression that was like, I think I want some of that. I think I'm missing some of that in my life. A freedom of expression that I didn't know I was hungry for. And you've seen me grow and expand through my own healing, through my own evolution in my study, and you've always supported me and encouraged me. And that's not always the case, sadly. I remember you handed me a drum with another sister, Kat, shout out to Kat, after one of Uria's singing circles in Mazunte, and you invited me to sing with you under a magical mango tree. And you encouraged me to take space and to open my voice, and you've always seen me. And never have I felt you would ever manipulate the knowledge you have of my wounds against me. And for that, I am immensely grateful, because that is how we actively heal our sisterhood wounds and build trust. And that is how we actively build the new earth that we all are desperately craving. So I believe we all deserve sisters and teachers like Echo. And for that, I welcome you here, Echo.
Wow, I don't think I've had so many like affirmations fed into me at one time. Thank you, Isa.
No,
Yeah,
so,
I feel very seen, very like very loved, very accepted. Thank you for that introduction.
well, it is the medicine that you offer so many around the world. So it is a privilege to be able to offer some of that back to you. Um, so let's not waste any more time and move to topics, which is plant medicines and shadow work. So I've written a lot of questions. We're going to flow with the conversation, but the first question for you, dear Echo, is an invitation to just take us inside your world and share what feels most relevant and true, and tell us about your relationship with the master plant teachers, how they have been part of your journey, and yeah, let you go.
All right. Well, that's a big one. So let's see. To give the the essence of the story. Yeah, for years and years and years, like most of my life, I'm 39 now. I didn't find plants and animal medicines until my mid 30s. And I had a deep, deep resistance to it. I had a deep resistance to my judgment of what I thought it meant to be out of control and to be under a substance or under influence that took me out of my mind. And as someone that's highly intellectual, I realized like being in control of my mind was the thing that felt the most safe for me in my life. And in reality, that safety was an illusion because I spent most of my life feeling actually very unsafe, but trying to control my environment by knowing everything and having all the details and having all the knowledge and reading all the books. And it kind of, what really came to me with plants and animal medicines was like when I was down on my knees, when I was 35, I got into a really bad relationship. And this was, just one relationship after the other. And it wasn't in a way much different from many relationships I've been in, except for the fact that it got to the point of such fragmentation and such dissonance that I really lost myself fully, and there wasn't a rope to get back. There wasn't an anchor to bring me back into myself. And the way that I got initiated into the plants and animals medicine world, I wouldn't say was a positive way to step in. It definitely came from the shadow associated with who learning with who. I think we cut out for a moment. You still hearing me?
Yeah,
Okay.
now.
Yeah, just let me know if my connection's being a little feisty. But yeah, it's so important to be careful with who you're being initiated by, with who you're sitting with, and why you're even sitting with medicine in the first place. And I didn't know my why. The reality is I think that life kind of came for me in that moment, and death in the same way. It was a moment of being brought to my knees and being humbled and being in a health crisis at the time, which wasn't really a crisis, but I made it a crisis because of my mentality and my victim consciousness. And going through 3 different surgeries in that year, I was deep in my victim consciousness of believing I was meeting something that might be the end of me, like that might be the end of my human life. And so I got initiated first with Mama Aya. And it was a profoundly healing experience. And so many people have very, very painful and very deeply like guttural and physical experiences with Mama. But for me, with this medicine, it was healing, so loving, so smooth in a way. And I feel really grateful for that because I think had it not initiated me in a kind way, that it might have frightened me from my plant and animal medicine path. And so that was one of in that space, I really felt my connection to everything. I began to see things while under the medicine, I began to see like different frequencies, and I got to see sound and music. You know, I got to see the color of different music and different intonations. It blew my mind at what was there existing beneath the surface, but that wasn't available to me when I was, you know, just in the material world without the ability to access these parts of myself that essentially are limited when I'm in my sober mind, or in my mind fixed on the intellectual aspect of things, like when I'm in the cognitive space of just thinking myself into existence. And is continuing on now for years. But I've been on both sides. I've been on the side of light, and I've been on the dark, dark side of not knowing why I'm doing something, not having intention, not sitting with the right shaman, not being in the right ceremony space, and the fragmentation that comes from that without integration has been also some of my greatest teachings. But my desire is that people don't have to go into these spaces creating more suffering for themselves, and can be more aware of how to go into these spaces and feel integrated and light as well. Because as much as I love learning from my suffering, I'm at a point now where I don't have to suffer to learn. I can learn in softness as well. And these medicines, no matter how excruciating some of the processes can be, they can also titrate between softness and that difficulty. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I find it so interesting that the way the spirit of ayahuasca in particular, I feel she knows how to work with you, and like knows exactly like what you need in that moment. Like for you in the introduction, it sounded like she knew on some level that gentleness and softness were going to be a door opening for you. And you know, it's interesting. For me, it was the opposite. It was like death immediately.
Die.
Of like an eagerness I feel to my like the way I was approaching ayahuasca, particularly in the beginning. I do feel like I had some extractive energy to, or like I need you to save me kind of. And she's not afraid to humble. I wouldn't finish. I don't like project medicine spirit, but yeah, of course you can tune into this later. We're gonna post it on the feed. Yeah, no worries. You've given us so much, and there are a few questions I want to offer you, and I feel like this will be very helpful, which is, how do you know when it's time for you to sit with medicine? Like, you know, people talk a lot about, oh, the medicine's calling me. What does that mean to you? How does that land? How do you know which medicine to work with? How do you know which medicine to work with? How often are medicines part of your life, would you say? How do you prepare? I mean, as a founder of a yoga teacher training, you and a teacher of meditation, you already are kind of showing up maybe like in a state of preparedness that most people might not be. So what else do you do to prepare, and how do you go about finding the quote unquote right ceremony or right shaman? And let's start there, because then I know I've given a lot.
Yeah. So I'll probably go on for a bit on this one, but I will say I'm a bit of a mixed bag in this category, because my whole life has been very interesting. Like when I look back at my life story, the things that happen in my life have not made a lot of sense. You know, it's been a lot of suffering, a lot of death from an early age, a lot of trauma, and then a perpetuation of that by my own habits of like staying in that victim mindset. And so my journey into medicine, like I didn't choose it, it chose me. And it chose me through, in a way, through another person, and through a really unhealthy relationship with a shaman, you know, a modern day shaman. And in that relationship, because I was passive and in victim consciousness, I really allowed this person to drive the wheel. And I really gave up my control because I felt at the time a false sense of security in the masculine to hold space for me to finally rest. It was like I finally wanted to put my shield down, and I found someone that I thought that I could trust. And little did I know, like, life had something much more like large and expansive in store. So I had this idea that I was there for this lovership and this partnership, but I feel through this and my ex-partner's connection to plant and animal medicines that I found what I was really needing in that relationship. And what I needed in an odd way, you know, sometimes we think, how can life do this to us? Why is this happening to me? And it felt like, Echo, you are so deeply ingrained in this loop that the only way that we're going to get you to do this really challenging work is through this false sense of like love and acceptance. And so it came through a love story, which is what I always wanted. You know, I wanted the Prince Charming and the beautiful love story. And it was incredibly painful. But in the last few days of my partnership, we had done so many different plants and animal medicines. I was not integrated. I was opening all the doors up in my mind because I was trusting this person that I was with. I was exposing myself to so many different ceremonies and rituals and different medicines. And in a way, it was like the rest of my life. It was chaotically like brilliant. And the way I went into it, I wouldn't suggest to people, but I wasn't prepared. I wasn't making choices for myself. I wasn't choosing what I was stepping into. I was just like, yes, give it to me, let's go. And it was like the extreme athlete of shamanism in a way. It was just like jumping into everything. If there was an opportunity, I was doing it. And on in the last few days of my partnership, I, without knowing what I was taking, took a medicine called 5, and that's what I'll leave it at here. If you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. But it's the God molecule, and it is a blast off, and it is incredibly potent and powerful. And I had no idea what I was opening myself up to when I took this in, and it just zapped me back to childhood. And I was just sitting there crying, and I was like, how could they leave me? I was just a child. And so all the things that had come up for the last year while I was deep in these ceremonies, here I am at this pivotal point, realizing that you're still this little girl. You're still this little girl crying, feeling abandoned, feeling rejected. And it was so clear to me that this was the most important aspect of my human existence in this moment, was to figure out what this little girl needed to feel safe and for her to feel loved, and to work with her like she was the seed point. And as soon as I realized that, that relationship ended a day later. There was no integration. I didn't know where I was going to live. My partner wanted me to leave immediately. He flew to Hawaii, and I'm sitting here in his community not knowing what is next. And I just opened my heart to this specific medicine. And I remember kind of having, it felt like a breakdown, like a mental breakdown, which can happen when you are blasting off and you are throwing yourself into the world of psychedelics and medicine without stewardship, without proper stewardship. But luckily for me, I had been doing so much work. I had been doing yoga and meditation for years, but I hadn't been embodying in a way what I was teaching. I was doing it for other people, but I wasn't in myself feeling safe. And so what happened in this moment, which was so beautiful, was that life, you know, source, whatever you want to call it, removed the toxic partnership. And there I am alone with a little girl. And I realized, like, this is the relationship I'm trying to heal. And I remember running on the side of a highway in downtown San Diego, and I was just crying, and I stopped running. And I just like put my arms down, and I was just like meditating while I stood on the side of the highway. And I was like, look, Father, like, if, you know, grandfather medicine, if I'm meant to work with you, like, send me a sign, like, let me know, because if I'm not, I release, I surrender. I don't need to do anything else right now. I'm in it. I am suffering. I don't need more. But if I'm meant to do more, then let me know. And 4 hours later, I received a phone call from a friend in Mazunte, Mexico. And I hadn't talked to him in a very long time. And he said, "Hey, I don't know why, but I felt called to share with you that I'm being initiated with this specific medicine by a shaman here in Mexico. And I feel like you're meant to be here." And I was like, all right, what's the nearest airport? And so I flew there without knowing what I was doing and really ill prepared, fragmented mentally, unstable in a way. I didn't have a home base. I had just gotten out of a relationship. I had just gone through a health crisis with 3 different surgeries in my body. And I show up. And I think for me, and again, like this is my personal journey, so I'm not suggesting it for anyone else, but when you get to the rock bottom and when you kind of have lost your hope and your faith, for me, it was just like humbling myself to the earth. And I felt like when I got to Mexico, it's earthy, you know, it's like you put your hands on the beach, you put your hands in the sand. And there was something about stepping foot into Oaxaca and being held by the feminine and the masculine energy that merges there in this vortex of literally a village called Pueblo Mágica, that I was able to be held by something bigger than myself. And what is that? I don't know. But all I know is that these very insidious, sinister aspects of the human shadow somehow led me to the lightest aspects of the human experience that I've had thus far. And what that gave me was a trust that I'm not a victim and that I do have choice, and that when things come that are challenging, that I face them, because more than likely on the other side of them is going to be a deep, powerful medicine if I don't spend so much time feeling sorry for myself. If I don't sit on the sidelines going, why me? Why did I get left? I'm not accepted. I don't have a home, which these are really good reasons to feel sadness. But I'd done that my whole life. And so at this point at 36, it was like, all right, we're going to sit up and we're going to get out of this sob story and we're going to do something with the pain and we're going to move through it. And so again, I ended up in Mexico being initiated with another shaman that I would say had some really tough, like tough love aspects to him as well. And I spoke up for myself. I finally started to assert my boundaries. And I went through it. I let him throw me into hell, essentially, and really put me through tobacco dieting and just like deep physical like pain and isolation. But I chose this time. It was different. So it was like, all right, like I know I'm strong enough to go through whatever you're going to give to me. You're not in control of me. This isn't your choice. It's my choice. And so I think this is one of the biggest aspects that's so important. If you're going to go down this route, make the choice for yourself. Don't do it because somebody said, gosh, you got to go try ayahuasca, or you need to go do this plant or animal medicine. Don't go to just have another unique experience that you want to write about on social media and you want to tell everybody how you're evolving and transcending. Do it because there's something in you that truly wants a better way of life for yourself and a better mindset for yourself, that wants to, that you want to show up for challenge as well, because it's not going to be easy. So many people think you're going to go, you're going to have this experience and it's going to be beautiful and you're going to tell stories about it. Yes, maybe, but it completely rocks your world and changes your life. And you need to be ready for the fact that a part of you will die in that ceremony, in a space, and the part of you that comes through might need to grieve for some time that version of you that no longer resonates with the world that you're trying to create. So that's a long-winded response, but I'm going to turn on the light as well.
This, well, I feel like that was medicine for me, for so many. And it's, yeah, working with the plant and animal medicines, healing, right? And so many of us we're not really raised and supported to feel our feelings. So in that healing process, it is going to be uncomfortable, and expect that, yeah, that it's not about having nice visions. And
Can I say something
yeah,
about that? like you're touching on something that I feel is so important right now, because what I'm realizing, like in the world that we live in, there is so much fragility around having uncomfortable like conversations, about having any kind of discomfort. Like we are such a pleasure and comfort seeking society that like we don't want to wait on things more than 20 minutes. We want to
Mhm.
see things lines. We want to be the first in line.
Yep.
We are so like pleasure seeking and so comfortable that I notice even in myself, like the
Yep.
little things that I need to feel comfortable in daily life. And I really try to push myself to go into the discomfort, but that's not what we're sold. And so that's something that I feel so grateful for in these ceremonies, like, you know, sitting with the huichol and sitting with peyote in Mexico as well. They don't care about your Western comfort.
No.
You know, you might go sit at a ceremony all night long for 12 hours singing to Source, God, to Grandfather Fire, whatever, you know, you feel. And they might not say anything for the first 2 hours. You get there, you sit on the ground, you be quiet, and you wait. And no one's telling you what's happening or when the ceremony is going to start. And you
Yeah.
just do. You do what is put there for you. And I remember my first peyote ceremony, like sitting there for those first 2 hours, waiting to be told what was happening. And I already knew, because at this point I had sat in so many other kind of medicine ceremonies that I was giggling to myself because my friend next to me was so pissed. And he was like, what are we even doing? What's happening? And then he realized we were all the way at the end of the circle and there was about 50 people there to be served. And every person, once the ceremony finally started, walked up so slowly to get their cup of medicine. And he's like, we're never going to go. And I just like laughed at him. And I said, my love, like the ceremony already started. Like, and just like they tell you with so many medicines, the moment you decide to do the medicine, it's already begun. And so I was just sitting there giggling. I was like, oh, yeah, peyote doesn't give a shit about my comfort or what I want. You realize how small you are. And in that medicine, I got whispered to in one of the ceremonies, make yourself small to make yourself big. And
Mm.
that was like such a lesson for me of like, you're not that important. Get over your self-importance and your need to be comfortable and your preferences. Like it's making you, you're othering yourself. You're separating yourself from the others. This is what's causing you more suffering. And I struggle with that every day. I'm still working on it.
Oh, me too, sis. Like, I love the medicines, and we also in the moment we're like, why? When you're just being humbled. There is in any moment, like if you're walking any a path with plant or animal medicines, you know at a certain point you learn like never to speak over, to overspeak, to over, you know, to self-aggrandize, to just to try to like own or claim more than I know I'm capable of. And I guess the next question I wanted to ask you is about integration. And my question is, how do you know you're integrating? How do you know when you're not integrating? How, yeah, I'll let you.
Well, it's really beautiful that you asked me this, because something that one of my sisters, and I told you about this woman, Ali, that I'll be co-leading the retreat with in September, she actually said this to me in a ceremony because she's been working with five much longer than me.
Mhm.
And she said to me, she's like, when I want the medicine, I don't allow myself to have it. But when I no longer want it, I know that it's time.
Mm.
And and what she was saying to me, she's like, you know, I don't need to do this medicine more than once or twice a year. And the way I was initiated, I went through 10 ceremonies over 10 days. And I was tobacco dieting as well. I was like literally just crawling on my floor, like throwing up each day and eating basic root vegetables without any oil or salt,
Oh,
fasting some days, blowing myself into oblivion, going through these ego deaths and just completely like just shattering myself in a way. And what I have realized in these ceremonies, especially with like higher dose medicines and especially the animal medicine, is you can get to spaces of really messing with like your neurochemistry. And this is a real thing. But what I do believe is my mind the way that it was working before, it needed to be obliterated in a way. And some of the things that I went through, there was a bit of fatigue after, and just needing to rest. And I remember on a specifically like high dose animal medicine session that I went through, I had tremors after.
Mm-hmm.
But what I had realized is my dissociation that I'd had most of my life, like that numbing out of the body, I finally awoken, like something woke up in my body that had been numb for so long, and I could feel more. And because I had been numb for so long, I immediately went into fear of I've done something wrong. I've done something wrong. I've messed it up. I've taken too much medicine. I'm never going to be the same. But when I relaxed into, okay, I chose to do this. It's happening. I can't retreat. I can't go back. So this is the present moment. How can I be with what's happening, and what can I learn from it? And what revealed to me when I stopped shouting in my fear, like the whispers of the medicine were so much more subtle. And they were saying, you don't know how to work with this energy yet, but this has always been here and it's here to stay. So now you have to learn to work with it. And so my first terminology for it, especially with my trauma-informed like mind, was I'm feeling anxiousness. I have all this anxiousness. And in that, I was like, what if I just dropped naming it? What if I dropped naming it anxiousness and I just felt energy and I just called it energy? What could I do with it then? And it gave me an opportunity to use all those tools of meditation and yoga and mindfulness to settle in a new way of being able to feel more. And I do feel more. And that is something as well to be prepared for, I think, when we're walking on this path, especially for those of us that might have avoidant tendencies or be dissociated in our bodies. We might know that something doesn't feel right and we want to feel more. We want to connect more through love and connection. We want to be more connected in our mind. But we have to really sit with, do we really want that? Because I do know people that tend to find their safety in being that avoidant and being that numb, and they say that they want it. But when it shows up after these ceremonies with that painting of fear, they're not able to actually appreciate what they've woken up. And it's like, you actually asked for that. That's why you came. Now it's here and you don't know what to do with that. And so I think integration to me means that you're able to metabolize your experience. You know that you're integrating when you're metabolizing and you're finding meaning and you're finding intention. But when you're not integrating, to me, I feel that you're in fear and you're back in a victim consciousness and you're doubting. And when you're doubting and you're in fear and you're in that victim consciousness, especially if that's already the way that you've painted your life, you're going to find the worst in what you've gone through. You're going to convince yourself of the worst possible scenario. So this is really important for integration. Yeah. And I think also you have to know if you have the right support network around you. If you are someone that is very lonely and someone that doesn't feel connected and someone that doesn't have family nearby or friends, and you're feeling quite fragmented already, and you're putting yourself into a ceremony space that can deepen that, you're setting yourself up in a way for that fear to come up. And so it's important to like have your tools around, like knowing, okay, I'm going to go into this space. Maybe I call Isa, a supportive sister, and say, hey sister, I'm like feeling super lonely right now and I'm not great in my interrelational dynamics, and I'm about to go sit with Mama Ayahuasca and I don't know what's going to come up, but do you have space to receive me if I get into like my fear or whatever it might be? So I know when I come out, I've got an anchor in a nervous system that's regulated if I can't regulate my own.
Yes. The power of community and the power of knowledge. You know yourself very well, Echo. And I want to I want to highlight the fact that you are already, and you were already very well resourced, stillness practice and a deep connection to that inner, and particularly you've been discussing the abuelo, the animal medicine, who is quite like, it's hard to compare and contrast because of course we all have different experiences, but known to be like the most, if not the most powerful psychedelic. And it I've facilitated hundreds of people through toad medicine ceremonies, and most people have the most experiences I saw were positive, mostly because of the space that was held. It was very contained, and that's very important. But I think it is important to be quite sober, right? When you are considering working with different medicines and understanding your own capacity, your own nervous system capacity to regulate yourself, or not even regulate, but be able to anchor yourself in the present moment when you are in that obliteration. Because we're talking about it, but until you're there, it's just possible to convey how these experiences can
You
be.
can't convey
And
it.
they're so destabilizing. And for that medicine in particular, I urge so much caution,
Mhm.
because it really takes a strong mind and a strong body and a strong support system to integrate those experiences, because they are so um, so earth shattering.
Can I say something about that?
Yes.
This is also the other thing that's really interesting, because I think so many of us, when we go through these ceremonies, we try to convey like what we've been through to someone else. And it's so individual. It's like so individual. And so what I also notice in the world, it's like it's hard to say what is right and wrong. And I don't believe that there is a right and wrong. It's hard to say, because I know for me, I went in the wrong way. You know, I went in not knowing what I was doing. I went in without the right supervision. I went in without integrating. And it gave me my sovereignty in a way. Like that obliteration and not being prepared for it actually helped me to surrender, because I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And I think that if you had told me exactly what I was doing, my fear might have not allowed me to do it.
Yeah.
And so I think everyone has a unique way that they find themselves on the path. And I know for me, like most of my beginnings with these medicines were quite mystical. Like my introduction to peyote, my introduction to five, and to Aya, I didn't choose any of them. Literally, the person, like the shaman or the medicine woman or man, would just show up in my life, and it just happened. And I remember with Aya, I just ended up on the list for a ceremony because I was at a farm that they were hosting them. Nobody knows how my name got on the list. Even the two women that were putting on the ceremony were like, "Did you do it? Did you
I
do
love
it?" And no one knew. No one knew me there. And so the older woman that was facilitating, she's like, "You're meant to be here." And so I ended up there. And with peyote, it was a dear friend of mine in Mazunte, and I didn't know him, but I ended up walking past him on a beach, and he had been reaching out to me on WhatsApp. I didn't know who he was. I wasn't very responsive to him because I just thought he was a random guy reaching out for connection. And I passed him on a beach, and I had literally that day Googled what is peyote, because I heard of it and I thought, I'm curious of this. I would like to know more about it. And then on the beach, he approached me and he said, "Hey, I facilitate and work with peyote, and we're having a ceremony in 2 days, and I feel like you're supposed to be there. Was why I was reaching out to you." And I was like, I just Googled that. That's crazy.
Mhm.
So it's different for each of us, because some of us might be researching it, our friend might be interested in it, we might feel called to it. But what I would just say is do your best to remain open to it being not at all what people say it is going to be for you, or being everything that it is and more, and just allowing it to be your experience. Like I know for me as the intellect, I want to know everything. I think letting go of your need to know everything and surrendering will be helpful in these spaces, because I know my first kind of 10 ceremonies with five, they were incredibly excruciating. I had never felt so much pain or obliteration in my life, because I wasn't fully letting the medicine in, and I was getting stuck in this purgatory in the center where I wasn't really in the material world anymore, and I wasn't in the what is not manifest. I was stuck in this in between, and I just felt like I was being ripped apart because I wasn't courageous enough to fully take the leap and believe and to let go. And I was just stuck in my cognitive mind, and this strong mind of mine kept me in excruciating pain until finally one day I just was like, and like let myself surrender. But it took hell. It took hell, and our minds are so strong. And I think the stronger our minds are, the more challenging it is when you go into this medicine, because you will try to hold on to your reality so deeply because your ego is so attached to it, and the medicine just like slap you on the hand, or I say it's like the God punch, it's like God punches you in the face and he's like,
Yeah.
or she.
Yeah, they're like hitting you with a stick, or with Wachuma, I feel like Wachuma cleans you with a feather. But they will find any and every part of resistance inside of you, and they will bring it up to be met and to be acknowledged at the very least. And hopefully it's a process of letting go. With the toad, I have not had the like beautiful, amazing experiences that other people have. My experiences with the toad have always been a fight. I've always been fighting. Yeah, it's so intense, and there's so much I want to like explore, but I feel like I would love to move to this conversation around shadow work. Shadow work. So first of all, I think it would be important for us to define shadow work and how plant medicines can help us through these processes. But of course, you've already been speaking so much about, I feel like people could generally intuit that the plant medicines, if you're working with them, they're going to bring up your shadows. They're going to bring up the things that are ready to be integrated, the things that have been denied, that have been stuck in the, the psychic material stuck in your subconscious that has not been able to safely be seen. Shadow work, and what are the potential? Oh, we already talked about the potential risks of not engaging with shadow work, which is essentially you run the risk of going crazy and just like losing losing your sense of reality afterwards. If you don't properly integrate. But in this plant medicine space, I mean, your initiation to the space was through pain and suffering. In many ways, mine was as well. We've both experienced manipulation and coercion and confusion around the facilitators, around shamans. So let's start with defining shadow work. And
So even as you were speaking about this, like I got so many just like goosebumps on my body, because I just want to, like, a disclaimer here for those of you that are watching that are interested to even navigate these waters. Like, this is not for the faint of heart. Like as we step into shadow work, as we step into working with plant and animal medicines, it is a real journey, and it is deep, and it is incredibly at times like painful. Because why I think that it can be so painful is there's so much that we don't want to look at in our material world. And so anything that you don't want to look at, if there is and because we are all human and we are not gods, and because there are so many imperfections and there are so many aspects of ourselves that we push aside and that we reject and that we exile into the dark corners of ourselves, and going into shadow work and going into plant and animal medicine and taking this path, you will not be able to hide from yourself any longer. And once you see what you see, you can't unsee it. And this is the thing. It's like we think, oh, I'm just going to try this. And I recently had a connection with someone who was going deep into his journey with mushrooms, which is beautiful. But for me, mushrooms are a deep connection to my shadow. I'm not having a joyous like trip and like playing and like dancing. I can have those moments of ecstasy, but that is such a teacher for me for what I'm not showing to the material world and what needs to be highlighted. And it is generally deep and dark and just dense. And this person in my life said, oh, you know, I'm just trying this out for a little bit, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to go deeply down this path. And I said, oh no, you're already on the path because you've already done many ceremonies. You think the medicine's just going to let you go at that point? You've already revealed yourself to yourself. And once that revelation comes through, you can stop doing the medicine, but the medicine will work through you for the rest of your life because you will see what you saw. And so that's why I think it's so important to note, like, you might go to one ceremony and think, oh, I'm just going for this experience. But once you're on that path and once you see what you see, it's a whole different world. And so shadow work. So shadow work, you know, I studied, like when I was growing up as a teenager, Carl Jung, was like a best friend to me. And Carl Jung is, you know, our leading psychoanalyst on the human shadow and has been, like, his work has been just renowned in the world for like over the past 50 years. And the shadow is really anything that's defined that's not revealed to the consciousness. So anything that is in the subconsciousness, and that can be implicit. There can also be more explicit nature, but usually it's implicit. It's in the fascia. It's in the dark recesses of the mind. It is in the addictive behaviors that we have and different addictive qualities that we have. It's in the exiles that we push to the back of our minds. And when we're working with the shadow, it can get really tricky because these parts of ourselves that we might have rejected for so long, you know, they might whisper for some time. They might ask you like in small whispers and very subtly for some time. But if they continue to whisper and you don't listen, they can begin to shout. And that's when they come up as addictions. And so some addictions get praised in the world, and that's overworking or over-exercising or perfectionism. And for me, how I deceived myself in my path was I didn't realize how much my personality, you know, my personality to the external world, it wasn't actually my personality. It was a set of coping mechanisms. It was a set of survival strategies. And that was be the best, do the best, be the smartest, be beautiful, be successful, like be everything. And that was running my life to the point of like burnout, to the point of fatigue, to the point of performance. And I remember in my late 20s, before I started my plant animal medicine journey, I was starting to do my shadow work journey. And I was realizing, oh my, I don't actually know what the intention behind my success is. And on the outside, I looked unstoppable. And at that time, I was an athlete and I was heavily praised for my coping mechanisms and for my survival strategies. So I continued because it was like, she doesn't stop. She doesn't need sleep. She wakes up at 6 a.m. and she just goes. And I thought, okay, I'm getting acceptance. I'm getting love. Like, this is who I am. But I was performing. I was peacocking. You know, I call it peacocking. Yeah. But then on the other side of things, you have addictions that are shamed. So we see somebody drinking alcohol. We see somebody in substance abuse. And we think that they're weak and we think that they're out of control. But to me, these are just opposite ends of the same thing. Yep. I was also burning out and not taking care of my body. And so the thing about shadow work is that it is very insidious and you are very clever and you will deceive yourself into thinking that a lot of your actions come from a pure place. But shadow work is getting like in the nitty gritty and like really climbing into the observer role of yourself and watching yourself daily, hyper vigilantly in a way, but with compassion, and seeing like, why are you in the friendships you're in? Why are you attracting the relationships that you're in? Why are you in certain scenarios that you're in? And that has been a psychedelic journey on its own without any plants and animal medicines. And I'm in that every single day. I'm still in that, you know, being on this journey for the past 10 years of really like sitting with my shadow, it's just gotten even more clever because the wiser and more intellectual I become in knowing how to track it, it hides in more insidious ways.
Yes.
And so when that comes up now, I can more easily use my resources to be like, "Ooh, I got you, spotlight." But it is a psychedelic journey to experience.
I mean, you've also just like defined integration. Like integration work is shadow work. Healing work is shadow work. And it's so true that the more you actually out these, these densities in your body and your being and your spirit, they do come back. And the healing spiral is like that. They come back to be revised in this other manifestation and expression of this dynamic. But now you know from the last experience you had, you learned this thing. And again, there's no destination here with the path. Like, we are living the path. There's no one moment when you're done with your shadow work, and because we all have our shadows. And
That's a really important one, I think. I just want to reiterate is that what I do know about the work for me in the beginning, it was really important to go to the ceremonies, to go to the rituals. I was doing plant and animal medicine very often.
yeah,
But now I don't need to do it so much. And this was something that you asked earlier. It touches me in such a different way, and it's so much more subtle. And I can take so little and not need to do it very often to get a powerful and potent message.
yeah,
And I think for some people, it could be one ceremony that lights you onto a path,
yeah,
and that's all you need. And that sets you on a path for liberation in
yeah,
some area of your life where you're limited and where you're condensed.
yeah,
For me, I come from a background of a lot of childhood abuse and sexual trauma and developmental trauma. So I think I needed to kind of be blasted open to, the way I've explained it before is I feel like I had a file cabinet and all the files like flew out.
yeah,
And then one by one, I like put them in and they're being organized now. But I think I'm a quite extreme case and I needed that. But I don't think that's necessary for everyone to
yeah,
just, be going to ceremonies constantly. And it works with me so profoundly now. And sometimes the medicine revisits without actually having to go into ceremony. I'll
yeah.
go back to a moment and then it'll take me on a wild path.
Uh, it's so true, because when you are approaching medicine in a more relational way, where you are, in relationship with this medicine, show up in your unexpected ways, and they will show up in the interactions you have with strangers, with family, your inner dialogue. And it's I've become so much more sensitive. Similar to you, I had a lot of adolescent trauma and developmental trauma, and yeah, just a lot of density to work through. And so my path was very violent at times, and I don't believe it needs to be that way. And for everyone, um, I'd love to hear from you about safe space, because set and setting and safety are so important. And we have both been in unwittingly, unknowingly, in so many unsafe medicine spaces, and feel like I really want to help, you know, address, because because there is such a prevalence of unsafe, not trauma informed spaces where there is medicine being ingested, and the risks of opening yourself up. Like, imagine you are literally opening up your spirit and your soul for surgery, and you are exposing the tenderest parts of your being. So that's at the level of, it's like you wouldn't just let anyone open you up for heart surgery, right? Think of medicine the same way. So whoever is holding that space, you want to feel in your body like, I can surrender here, and I trust that this person wants the best for me. So I'm curious, Echo, how do you know for yourself when you are in a safe space, and how do you strengthen that connection to our inner guidance, because it's not just about Googling reviews. It's not just about this center, this shaman, everyone says they're the best, or the Google reviews say this center is the best, because I've done that route and ended up in very unsafe, re-traumatizing ceremonial experiences. So the most important tool we have is our inner guidance, is our inner compass. And I'm wondering, like, what are the signs and what are the messages? How are you in that conversation with your inner guidance to know whether or not you are in a safe space?
You know, I mean, the biggest thing for me now is I feel like you'll never be in a safe space if you don't feel safe in yourself. And if you don't feel safe in yourself, each space has the possibility of being re-traumatizing, because what you're going to experience in these ceremonies is most likely going to be fragmenting, and it's going to be fragmenting for your benefit if you choose for it to be. But you have to feel safe enough in yourself to know that you, number one, always have a choice. If you get there and say you traveled all the way to another country to do this medicine, and you get there and you get a gut feeling, but you're like, oh, I've already paid all this money and I'm here, I have to do it, I have to have this experience. If you don't give yourself the right to say no and to walk away, then you're not safe. You need to allow yourself at any point to leave the space if you think that that's necessary. And if you're not completely sure, you know, making sure that there's at least somebody in that space that's not the medicine man, that's there with you, or the medicine woman, but someone that you can go to in the ceremony. A lot of ceremonies, you'll have different angels or space holders, and knowing that there's someone that you can go to if things are to go wrong, that you trust. And for me, I personally would never do medicine alone with a medicine man or a medicine woman unless I knew them and I felt very safe with them without having a safe space with me. So when I was being initiated to work with Five in Mexico, I was doing it with a dear brother. The shaman, I wouldn't say, made me feel very safe. He had very kind of brutal techniques in a way that he was just really intense, and that was his way. But my friend was always there beside me. And so I would serve my friend would serve me. When we were going through our initiation, the three of us were always there. So that felt safe for me. Mm-hmm. I now, as a woman, prefer to sit with other female medicine women. For me, it just feels like that I need that connection to the feminine. For me, a lot of times the medicine, in many senses, all the different ceremonies can feel a bit masculine because I'm really surrendering in that space. So it feels better for me to be sitting with a woman, and that's a personal preference. And so I think that if you're going to approach this path, you first and foremost have to get really clear with your boundaries. Like, what are your boundaries? What is your intention for going in this? And then trusting your gut. And if you don't have a strong intuition yet, and you're quite dissociated and numb and not sure why you're doing what you're doing, then I would wait until I knew someone personally that had worked with someone that they really trusted, that I could go and approach that person to work with them. I wouldn't be Googling. I wouldn't just be going to Peru. I wouldn't just be going to specific places that I know have these type of plants and animal medicines, because this is such a deep path. You don't want to start out by re-triggering or re-traumatizing something that's going to push you further away from it.
That is incredible, incredible advice. Thank you. I feel like I'd love to expand this conversation around plant medicine into the conversation, or plant medicine and shadow work, into the community aspect of this, because community is so important. It's what has really become such a focus in my life, like supporting my community and growing and nurturing my community. And we really do, we are wounded relationally and we heal relationally. And so having that circle around you, whether it's a virtual, whether it's one person, whether it's 50 people, the community impact shapes us in so many ways. And if we are if we're blessed, we're in a community who will be able to hold us and acknowledge us through our transformation with these medicines, because ultimately to commit to a path with medicine is to commit to the many deaths of the old versions of yourself. And it's important through these initiations to be acknowledged and witnessed and seen and supported by your community. And what is so sad and angering and disappointing and is like a source of so much energy in my being at the moment is all the ways in which I see our communities are failing to show up for this deep work in integrity. And I have been failed by several people who I thought were friends and brothers and sisters, and in the medicine community. And it was, and I am still processing, and I still hold on to my optimism and my light and my trust in community, of course. But I feel it is so important to have the uncomfortable conversations. And we see so much spiritual bypassing in the spiritual communities, and it can be kind of an extra level of fucked up, because we're all supposed to be, not supposed to be, but many of our intentions in spiritual communities is to heal and is to hold that sacred space. So I'm wondering, like, Echo, why, first of all, you're very tuned into yourself, and therefore you're very tuned into the collective. So what are the biggest barriers you're seeing? What's happening? Why is there this issue that is so rampant, where there's so much emotional, physical, energetic, spiritual violence that is being inflicted on each other, often unconsciously? And why the resistance when it is brought to light? Because you are such a leader in all the communities that you are in. You are an international leader, I see you, and you are calling forward these conversations, and I want to be part of them. So whatever, take the reign.
Well, I think that what we're seeing a lot right now is sadly like the repercussions of learning and being conditioned to no longer rely on one another. And this came through to me in a medicine ceremony. I remember I had my hands on the earth. I was sitting with ayahuasca, and I just kept saying those words, like, when did we learn to stop relying on each other? Like, when did we learn to stop relying on each other? And I, strangely enough, before I got on this call with you, I ended up sitting in a cafe with two Christian women that were talking to me about their beliefs and their systems. And I come from a deeply Christian background, that I left the church 20 years ago and started studying world religions and different beliefs. And I've always been a very devout person to something bigger than myself, without putting a term on that and being like, this is the belief and this is the system. But what I see, and what I was talking to these two women about is, they said, we would love to believe that there's a middle path and that we can be a part of the material world, and we can renounce and be a part of this devotional world, and we can have it all. But they said, it doesn't work. We've tried. Society has been trying to do that. And we have these ideas of bringing that devotion back into the material world, but we get lost along the way. And I was thinking, even for myself, like, I live individually. I don't live in community. I eat for myself. I plan for myself. In a way, I live a very selfish existence. Like, I'm giving a lot, I'm teaching, and I'm offering these spaces to be in connection. But the reality is, on a daily basis, I'm not stewarding the land. I'm not caretaking anyone. I'm not sitting in on community forums. And I want that. But what I find in myself is such disappointment when I drop into spiritual community and see the fragility that exists in those spaces, the fragility to have uncomfortable conversations. And I think that about this situation. I won't go deep into it, but this year was the first year in my life where I called someone out publicly. And I thought about the repercussions of what that would mean, because I haven't called anyone out in my past, even when I have been in abusive situations and really painful situations, especially around the medicine world. And I there was a part of me that would always get small and convince myself of compassion and love and see the beauty in the other person and really want to give compassion to that. But in this specific situation, I thought, this has been too habitual. This has been going on for years. This is multiple people are suffering at the behavior of this specific person. And when I spoke that into a small community and asked for help and said, let's have a forum. Let's create a 12-person forum where we sit this person down. They get the space to speak. The different women in this conversation get to speak. And let's all as humans like figure out what we can do to rehabilitate the situation and build a bridge. And crickets, like no one wanted to have the uncomfortable conversation. And a lot of what was said was so self-entitled to peace. So many people just wanted peace. And I said, do you think I don't want peace? I would also like peace, but I'm seeing something that's not okay. And in integrity with what I'm here to do and what I feel is right for something higher than myself and each of us, I'm opening this conversation because it needs to be had. And it didn't happen. And the person that was on the other side of being called out, you know, rejected stepping up to the plate and doing anything and looking at himself and communicating. And I felt such disappointment in the fact that all of these people, you know, were shadow workers, medicinistas in the spiritual space, that I feel something that we have to look out for is this spiritual egoism of, I'm so evolved that I no longer have to put myself in the banal experience of the material world, because to me that's not ascension, that's not evolution. To me ascension is descension. It's like actually going into the body deep and being grounded in the earth that feeds you. You know, to me it's like we need to learn to care for things. We just go to the store to feed ourselves. All of our clothes, we can just purchase them right down the way, and we are so interdependent, but we don't even know who we are benefiting from. We don't know where the hands come from that, you know, have put their hands in the earth to give us the food that we eat. We don't know where the clothes come on our back, and we're so disconnected because we want everything to be so easy. You know, we've like really expedited the human experience in a way, and we've become so consumerist and so comfortable that we don't have these difficult conversations because we don't have to. There's 8 billion of us. If it doesn't work out with one person, we could just leave them behind and we can go find someone else. If it doesn't work with that spiritual community, we can just fly to Sri Lanka, Copenhagen, Bali, like all these different places. And this makes me sad because it's just so much easier to leave and to depart something, or only give the most shallow aspect of yourself to it because you don't feel safe in it, you don't trust it. And in that not trusting and not really being fully, in a way, a healthy way attached to something, a lot of us, like, we're doing really great work and we have beautiful friendships, but I wonder how deep they really are if we can't have deeper conversations. And what I realized in my speaking up this year is I got seen as an angry woman. I got seen as, you know, almost cancel culture has now become cancel the canceler.
Yeah.
And so my words weren't even really respected or seen or listened to because they were too aggressive. And to me, I was speaking about aggressive acts, but we didn't, no one even said anything about that. It was only aggressive because I was bringing it into the light. And I felt really scared in that moment because this was in a bubble of spiritual community. And I thought, wow, we all love each other and we're here to do this work around shadow and darkness. And we can't even have a conversation about this. How do we expect people in the city, like how do we, that are even more disconnected and not living in these small bubbles, to do the work? And so I really think this begins with the fact that we've all learned to stop relying on each other and that we're replaceable. And at best, like I feel that we're treating one another not as humans anymore, but as options. It's like, you're an option to me. You're an experience to me. And I have experienced that sadly within intimate relationship and in some friendships is like I am a tool to some people. I am a resource, I'm an experience to be had. And that makes me so sad because then it's like a whole other level and shield of safety comes up of not knowing who I can truly trust and what community I can fully surrender into. And I think we can do better than that. I would like to hope that we can do better than that.
Well, sister, I really honor and appreciate the this sacred work that you are doing and these sacred invitations you are offering to your community to meet themselves at a, you know, more honestly. And I find like something that's coming up for me is that especially in these communities, there's so much talk around the divine feminine and honoring the divine feminine and honoring Mother Earth and honoring this feminine wisdom. And you see there's goddesses everywhere on Instagram. And part of me feels like, oh, really? If you really honor the divine feminine, if you really honor, she's chaos and she is anger, she's Kali, she is that sacred rage of injustice and bringing to, of this is an out of balance. There is no sacred reciprocity here. And this picture and this that you have painted us, there is a lacking of sacred reciprocity with the medicines, with the earth, with ourselves, and with each other. And to really honor the feminine is to honor the fullness of the feminine. And I've been called an angry woman as well. This is like just part of my path as well, because I'm not afraid, and I'm at the threshold as well. I'm at capacity of well for this bullshit. And oh, Maddie's just saying that she says hello. Our
Mm-hmm.
sister Maddie, who served us combo.
I want to say something about what you just said, you know, in the divine feminine. I also like this is a big frustration for me of how many buzzwords are being thrown around in the spiritual community and not really being backed up with integrity. And this was something that really like it really got me this year when I did speak up, because those that I actually thought and I respected as women in the field that were holding space for that kind of divine, wild, chaotic feminine were some that sat down and they talked about the astrology. They're like, oh, you know, it's the full moon or this or that. And I don't have the energy for this right now. And I'm moving through my own waves. And I just thought, how is change going to happen? You know, how is change going to happen if we're so fragile that we can't have these conversations? And the reality, if we want to get spiritual, when we talk about Shiva and Shakti and spaciousness and creativity, and we talk about Purusha and Prakriti, the reality in that yogic philosophy is that spaciousness, which is the divine, which is safe, gives creative force, like the ability to surrender to chaos. But I'm not seeing a lot of healthy masculine. And this is not just saying male bodies. I'm just saying in the masculine pole, I'm not seeing a lot of spaces that feel fully healthy enough for the feminine to surrender in. And so when we're asking for that, and then we get upset because we see the chaotic, you know, wildness of the feminine, that's also because of our inability to rely on each other. We're not creating safe spaces for those poles to play together. And so when I had proposed this in community to create a forum, to create safety, that was my bridge to the masculine and feminine, saying, let's meet somewhere in the center. And when that was not given space, then I spoke, you know, and to me, that wasn't even chaotic. You know, I can get much more chaotic and more Kali-like. This to me was very practical and rooted and grounded, and it was still received as anger. And I thought, if someone like me speaks up, who is already outspoken, who is opinionated, who I feel is like, I'm very much like in my power and still have my things, how would I expect somebody else another woman to speak up that's not in her power. There would be fear. There wouldn't be the space for that. And so that frightens me, that there are a lot of voices that we're not hearing. There are a lot of voices that have something to add to the conversation that we're not hearing because we are not really fully listening, and we're not creating the safe space to hear all of our brothers and sisters. And so to me, it's like, yes, there's astrology, and we all are bleeding with the moon as women as well. And as men, we're busy and we've got things to do. And I'm generalizing right now. But what I mean to say is, as a community, we've got to stop being so self-aggrandizing and selfish and so entitled to think that we're just so busy and that our purpose and our path is just so important that we can't put community first. Like, we need to rely on one another. That's what we're here to do. And you're seeing more and more statistics showing like single households with one person living in it around the world, higher rates of suicide, people feeling lonely.
Yeah.
And the reality of this is we've stopped relying on one another. And
Yes.
so I am so grateful for the incredible global community that I have around me that loves me and supports me, because I couldn't do it without them. And where I'm at now, teaching and leading, like, yes, I'm on the road and I'm alone and I spend most of my days alone. But the reason that I can feel safe in that is, yeah, I've done a lot of work on myself, but I know that I've got sisters and brothers that have my back. I'm not doing this on my own. And the moment that you think that you're so independent and you're so resilient and that you're doing it all on your own, you're fooling yourself. You're absolutely fooling yourself. Community is so important, and we need to learn to rely on one another again in a healthy way.
Yeah, and we need to not be afraid of the dirty work that has to happen to recreate a healthy community, because we were all swimming in the waters. If you grew up in the West, you were raised in rugged individualism, capitalism, consumerism. So we have to actively, allow ourselves to be inconvenienced, as Echo is talking about, and to take the time from what we want to do and what our dreams are to tend to the relationship life that begging for attention, because those are the real invitations that are coming from the medicine. It's always like, how are you? I mean, of course, this always comes back to that relationship with self. But in our life, there are invitations all around us to become more embodied and more integrity and more in alignment. And wondering how, as someone who is unafraid to have the uncomfortable conversations, as someone who has, I mean, I left a toxic medicine space, the center that I was working at. To be honest, there was a lot of toxic masculinity and this culture, competition and unsafety, and not really feeling like you could actually speak about what was real and true in your experience, but because there was the presence of these hierarchies, so only some people were allowed to speak and only some people's opinions were valued, and other people's, basically didn't exist. And I felt like that. And so we've taken lots of turns, and we know what it's like to be in an unhealthy, unsafe community. What are your tips for those of us to cultivate that interdependence? What does that look like in practice in your relationships? And some models would be great.
Yeah. So what I would say here, and I just realized this, we've already been here for an hour and a half. Let's give ourselves 15 more minutes before I tire.
Yeah.
So in this one, I think we have to be really careful about becoming codependent in community and in relationship and giving our power away to that hierarchy. And I think anytime someone puts themselves over you to be your teacher or your guru, to me, this is already a red flag. And I think the greatest teachers will tell you and will bring you into like a place of equality with them, that you know, the way that I love seeing this is like, yeah, I'm on the path, and maybe I'm walking a little bit further on the path because I've been on it a little bit longer, but we're going in the same direction. And at some point, we're going to get to the same spot. And so as I go, I'll pick up resources. That way that when you arrive, I have more resources for us to know what we need to do here. And I'm just speaking in general, not about me in particular. But I think that the moment I sit with a shaman or a medicine woman or in a community, and if I see someone communicating as if they know everything, then to me, this is already a red flag of if I would trust being in that space with that person as a facilitator. So I think simplicity and inclusion and equality and knowing that what you have to say is also important, and knowing that it's welcome. The fact that you were saying that in this community, like only certain people got to say something, to me, that then and there would be a no-go for me. And that's why at the moment where I'm at, sitting with what community is my community, it's a little scary because I feel like a lone wolf at the moment. I have this like global community of people, like, you know, one or two people in all these different places, but the places that I spent the most time in that were communities, I'm seeing the limitations there, and I'm trying to decide, like, where do I want to live and where is home and what does community mean to me? Because I want to live somewhere where people are able to show up for all the human experience, not for when they have to be quiet and somebody else gets to talk, and not for when it's uncomfortable conversations, not when it's about their specific behavior. Because I want to show up if you have something to say about my behavior or where I'm not in integrity. I want to hear what you have to say, because I can learn from that. If you're not willing to do the same thing, I don't feel safe in that space with you. And so I do have, you know, a handful of those people in my life, but they're not in one place. And so I would love, you know, this magical community to exist where I can take all of the people that I know that I feel like are really living in their integrity and in their authenticity, but it doesn't exist yet. So I'm starting to believe that maybe I just need to create it, buy a piece of land, and here we
Oh,
go.
I don't think I know. Um, I want to honor your time and your being and your need for rest and rejuvenation. And you have shared so many resources, so much wisdom, so much of your experience and your story. And it is a blessing for us all to hear from you. And I hope, and I mean, there's so much uh, but I want to honor your time.
Well, I
So
want to say one more thing about September.
yeah, I wanted to say, Echo, you have some offerings coming up, and I would love for you to share everything that is on the calendar for you.
Yeah. So in the essence of speaking about in plant and animal medicines, I do have a retreat coming up, which is like a once in a lifetime first that I've seen, and we're really excited to kind of bring. And it's this new creation, and hopefully we'll be doing it twice a year. It's going to be in France, September the 23rd through October 2nd, and it is 9 days of silence with five, so with the toad medicine. And we will be also dancing and moving our bodies. I'll be DJing and doing music and teaching yoga and meditation. And I will be co-teaching this with like a dear medicine sister that is a death doula, has been helping people transition metaphysically the death process, but also physically. She is such like a wondrous witch in so many rights. And we're going to be doing a live on Friday about our retreat. So for those of you that are interested, you can write me, reach out. It's going to be at 9 a.m. on Friday, which is Prague time. I don't know what code I'm in, but Prague. So I think it's like Central Eastern Standard
Many
Time.
hours.
And yeah. And then in terms of online work, I'm doing lots of work with the shadow, lots of work with integration. And I have an upcoming Detangling the Human Heart online container for 1 month. It's in September. And this is getting deep into shadow work through attachment theory, through nervous system regulation, through understanding brain chemistry and physiology, and looking at how trauma, challenge, unmetabolized experiences like live and persist in the body and in the mind. And my yoga teacher training is at the beginning of this upcoming year. There's one that's online for 3 or 4 months, and then there's one that's a hybrid, 3 months online, and then 2 weeks in Japan together in April. And then the last thing I have is a writing and yoga and mindfulness retreat in Guatemala in November for 5 days. So all of that is on my page. It's on echoflowyoga.com. It's on our Echo Instagram. If you're interested in doing any of this kind of work together, you can reach out to me. But yeah, it's lots.
Echo things, Echo's energy, her medicine changed my life. So run, don't any of her offerings. I did her yoga teacher training. I still need to finish it, but one day.
Yeah.
I love you.
And thank you so much for doing this and like sharing this with the world, because I do feel, you know, medicine and shadow work, it is becoming a buzzword. It is becoming kind of a buzz experience, but it is so deep and profound, and it's not just, you know, another experience to consume.
Yes.
It is a choice. It's a choice. It's a path to be made. And I really hope for those of you that have like stayed tuned in and that are really considering it, that you go in with like deep devotion and reverence for yourself, for your experience, and just really take care of yourself, all the parts of yourself, because all the parts are going to come up. You know, the little one, the adolescent, the hurt one, the angry one, and just you need to go in with so much compassion for what you are in total as a system. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love you.
Love you.
Love you too. Blessings. Be blessed, everyone.
Thank you, my love. I'll see you soon.